Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Ten-Four Tavern. Pete, how are you?
Good, brother. Life's good. How's things?
Very good, very good. Well, I'm in the great state of Colorado, sitting in Denver somewhere. So I got a little backdrop going. Welcome, everybody, to the Ten-Four Tavern podcast on the Finest Unfiltered channel. Got a great guest for you today. Detective first grade, retired Mike O'Keefe, personal friend of mine. Never really worked with him and directly, but a lot of overlap in Brooklyn North and a lot of mutual friends. So we'll get into that part. And Pete, you're getting to meet him for the first time, so should be a great show. And he wants to actually interview you, I think, a little bit.
Hey, man, any questions? Fair game with me, brother. You know that.
Yeah. So, so we're going to get into that. We'll let's see if we can pull this up. So this is Mike O'Keefe. Mike is he's a hero cop, detective. Got into a big caper. He'll get into it. Stirred up some trouble up in Washington Heights back in '92. Investigative career, moving around. He'll tell you all about where he ended up. I knew him mostly from the 8-3 in Brooklyn North. And then he's as he was telling us, creative writer, English major, and wrote some novels. So we'll get into the Paddy Durr series too. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a good one.
Tommy, I know we throw the word legend around a lot in our profession. And, some folks are, some aren't. Mike's definitely a legend. And what he went through, man, unbelievable story. Really unbelievable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what we're going to do now, Mike, I'm going to bring you in. So let's get into this.
How's it going, Tom and Pete?
Good, brother.
Mike O'Keefe, what a pleasure to have you. Thanks for taking the time and talking to Pete and I and the audience, of course. We're excited to get into this. We talked some stuff. So as you know, it's Ten-Four Tavern, and we invite our guests to bring their drink of choice, alcohol, non-alcohol, doesn't matter. Nobody's judging here. But Pete and I like to share a beer or a cocktail every once in a while. For the audience, we highly encourage responsible drinking. We're not talking about getting hammered here or banged up or anything like that. And also, if you do have a problem and, if you need help on this or anything else in the public safety, law enforcement, military space, please make that phone call you need to make. So what are you drinking, Pete?
I ran out of box wine, Tom. So I'm having a partly cloudy IPA from a nearby brewery here in Sterling, Virginia. And it's quite cold, so I'm looking forward to starting to sip on it while we speak to Mike.
Well, I think you got Solus Brewing from Sterling, Virginia, right? Partly cloudy?
Correct. Yes, Solus, great place. There's a few around here. That's one of my go-tos. Good food and ice-cold beer. But Partly Cloudy is one of my favorites. They have many, many on the menu. I highly encourage anybody visiting the Northern Virginia area to stop by. So
I'm doing a Deschutes fresh squeezed from Bend, Oregon. I tried to get a local. Here in Denver. Couldn't find something to bring to the table, so I got a West Coast Bend. And if anyone's ever been to Bend, Oregon, fantastic, beautiful place, great country, really, really nice, good brewery, and a really, really good city. So with that, cheers, Mike. I know you're drinking iced coffee and H2O today, so let's get into this, man.
Well, before that, let's give a shout out to our friends at the Black Rifle Coffee Company.
Oh, yeah.
My coffee comes courtesy of them.
Perfect. Black Rifle Coffee, everybody. Black Rifle. We'll get into it. So listen, we talked about some things going on, and Mike, we definitely want to get into your career. So if you want to give the audience a little bit of an intro on, who you are, where you came from, where you grew up a little bit, get into that, and then segue into the police. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about your police career, and then we're going to bring in some current events that we talked about. We posted up on the anti-Semitism that's going on in college campus behaviors. We talked about the, you made an indication you wanted to get into it with Pete a little bit on the Fast and Furious, and I'm sure he'll be happy to talk to you about that. And then we'll talk about the Summer of Love, and we'll actually kind of compare that to your incident and kind of see, I know you had an interesting perspective on it. You were telling me how things that happened in 1992 and it could have been just like 2020, but for some things. So that's certainly your opinion. You should share that with the audience. So what do you think, guys? That sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So Mike, the floor is yours. Tell the audience who you are. Let's get to know you.
I'm Mike O'Keefe, nice Catholic boy from Ridgewood, New York. Grew up on the borderline of Brooklyn and Queens. Big area for firemen. So and gangsters, and I wasn't going to be one of those, so it was pretty obvious I was going to do one or the other. I wasn't trying to be a cop. I was in college, getting near to graduating when my father fell ill, and I needed steady income right away, and so I called up and cried to my investigator and said, "You got to get me in the next academy class." And that's where it began. I did my first 6 months in Midtown. Made a lot of work 6 to 2s on the old Deuce when it was the Deuce. So I made a lot of robbery collars, made a handful of gun collars. Back then they had the training detective program. And my training detective was retired first grader Sammy Gribben, who ended up, when they killed the detective program halfway through my NSU, Sammy went back to the 3-4. And I said to him, I says, "Where do you think I should go?" He goes, "Well, they're not going to let you stay in Division 3. You're not a fit for Manhattan South." Evidently, I made too many arrests and sent too many people through the system wearing gauze hats. So Sammy suggested I go up to the 3-4 because it was busy there. Yeah, he wasn't lying. Couldn't get through a set without getting shot at. It was an amazing place to be a young cop because it was an absolute lawless environment. You were the police and you got to handle your business. So I did that until July 3rd of 1992, when evidently I shot the patron saint of the Dominican drug cartel, igniting the Washington Heights riots. Funny thing about that is the night that I went home after everything was done, the original detective that caught the case was a great old timer named Huey Drain, one of my mentors. And I stopped up to see him at like 4 o'clock in the morning before going home and said, "Anything else you need from me, Hugh?" And he says, "No, man, everything's good. This case is a bunt. It's not going to be a problem." I said, "Oh, okay, very good." That was comforting. And I went home, slept for a while, and ended up going out to a barbecue. My wife, at the time, she was my fiance, worked in the 13th Precinct, and she was in SP10, and they were the first cops that were issued cell phones. They were these great big gray bricks. So I'm hanging out at this party in Seaford, and her phone goes off. And it's her partner, Pete West. God rest his soul. He says to her, "Why am I on a rooftop in Washington Heights getting shot at?" And that was the first inkling that maybe that bunt hit a seam in the carpet and went into left field. So I got right on the phone to the squad and found out that my ass was in the fire. Yeah. And it was pretty much sublime for the next 4 months. But that's when my nightmare began. I was very fortunate to have Robert Morgenthau as the district attorney of New York County. Say what you want about the man. You might not have liked him, but I'm going to tell you, he was a man of integrity. Because when the grand jury investigation was finally wrapping up, David Dickens went over to see him and said the community will not stand for a not guilty verdict. You indict that cop, or the city's going to burn, and the blood is on your hands. And Morgenthau threw him out of his office. He ran a grand jury that Alvin Bragg has no experience with. He presented the evidence. There was no agenda involved. And the evidence was so overwhelming in my favor, you would have thought that Dinkins would have said, "Well, maybe I got this one wrong." But he didn't. He doubled down and he walked a Give me a second. He walked an investigation over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, his friends in the Democratic Party in New York, for civil rights violations for my anti-crime team, under the theory that we made too many gun arrests. And for the better part of 4 years, I pretty much had an FBI escort everywhere I went, off duty to work, shadowing me. Unfortunately, after spending millions of dollars in 3 wasted years, the U.S. attorney wasn't walking away without a pound of flesh, and they indicted my partner, Patrick Reagan, for perjury, a perjury that never existed. There was no materiality. There was no attempt to mislead anyone. They didn't like his answers. I'm not surprised. He's a good friend of mine. When you speak to Paddy, the only thing you do when you're done is come away confused. He still has a brogue. Can't seem to stay on point very long. I believe that they chose him as a target for the perjury trap just because of the way that he spoke, that they were going to be able to trip him up. And they did. He did a year in federal custody in Kentucky. We flew out a couple of times to see him. But he's been incomplete. He wants to be made whole because he knows he didn't do anything.
Right.
And we've had several appeals and several attempts to get him pardoned. We just haven't gotten the pardon application on the right desk yet. Whoever needs to see this, when they do, they're going to see the injustice of it, and they're going to make Paddy whole. And to be perfectly honest, if that comes to pass, that will be the greatest accomplishment of my career.
Okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's do a call to action to the audience. Like, if anyone who knows it can reach out to their local. I mean, you want to make that call, Mike? Who are the
Congressman,
politicians?
anyone you have influence with, anyone you want to write to. Simple fact of the matter is, coming from New York, you're not writing to Chuck Schumer. He doesn't give a shit about us. And who's the other one? Kristen Gillibrand. No feminism issue here. Don't bother writing to her. She doesn't care about cops either. But anybody else, just let them know that the DOJ should be made aware that this pardon request is in progress. Anyone of any influence who can see that this file gets on the right desk would be. Where
does that pardon sit right now, Mike? Who's spearheading that through the channels?
Right now, we actually have 2 attorneys. One is the retired chief, Mike Shea, and Maureen Duffy, who used to be a Bronx DA. She was a PAA in Manhattan when we were running around in anti-crime, and her dad is retired Inspector Mike Duffy from the NYPD. I think he retired out of the Manhattan DA squad. So they're spearheading the legal push. We're at the point now we have to figure out who gets it. Like, I don't know that there's necessarily a standard checking order of who you have to send it to get it where it has to be. Basically, if Donald Trump hears this story, Patty, he'll be pardoned tomorrow.
All right, so you know what we'll do, since we'll pull this up, and for next week's show, Mike, Pete, we'll bring a contact information to let the audience know as well and follow up. But just give his full name and rank and where he worked and his thing, Mike, now, and then we'll get into let's go back to the 3-4.
Sure.
Okay. So just give Paddy Reagan's title and any other information for the listeners here.
He was police officer Patrick Reagan. He's one of those guys that would have been you just knew he was going to be a first grade detective if they just left him alone to do the job. Interestingly enough, a year before he was indicted for the phony baloney perjury, he was shot in the face. He's a Combat Cross winner.
Wow.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
This is the guy you pick on?
Yeah.
The guy that gets in the way of a bullet? Yeah. Nice.
That administration didn't have much love for the police, as we know. I mean, they paid for Kiko's funeral, for Christ's sake.
Did they? I wasn't aware of that. No, I'm joking. I knew that. That galled me in particular because I still lived in the city at the time. And he used my tax money to pay for his royal funeral, if you will.
Well,
Meanwhile, the man had his gun down my throat twice.
Yeah, like you, I'm a good Catholic boy as well. And I remember Cardinal O'Connor at the time even came out and made some comments that were sentimental towards Kiko and kind of derogatory towards you and law enforcement in general. And it really made me question my feelings towards the church for a while. I was like, that's completely inappropriate. So
what might give you comfort, Pete, is my mother actually got on the phone with him and yelled at him. He apologized to me. He couldn't accept the fact that he was being used by Dinkins and the other cabal in Upper Manhattan. And we ended the conversation where he said he would do anything on my behalf if he could help me. So when Paddy got indicted, the first thing I did is I reached out to the Cardinal. I said, remember the promise you made me. This is a specious case. It's spite. They're coming after him because they couldn't get me. I said, you really need, if you have any influence with the U.S. Attorney's Office, you should use it now. And he didn't get back to me. We were supposed to talk in a couple of days, and he never got back to me. And I got a phone call from somebody in his office, and they told me that the feds went and dropped some bullshit on him, that we were secretly agents of the IRA. Now, that's interesting because later on, when the case came out in trial and Paddy was being prosecuted, we found out that the operation to get us for the civil rights violations was called Operation Bagpipes, because we were largely Irish, of Irish descent. I wonder how that would work if it was another ethnicity.
It wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's okay. I guess it's our own fault being Irish, though. We really don't give a shit what you think of us. And for that reason, I guess we're targets.
Well, Mike, let's go back. Like, let's when you show up in the 3-4 and you start working in 3-4 and how you work yourself from patrol into anti-crime there.
Yeah.
And I got the 3-4 up on the screen.
That's the old one. Yeah, that's the one on Wadsworth Avenue. I got to work there for about a month before we moved into the new building on Broadway, around the corner. Crazy place, 155th Street, all the way up to the top of the island from river to river, largely Dominican neighborhood, but you had some other pockets. Still had the old Sugar Hill gang up on 159th Street in St. Nicholas. Those guys were a hoot. And we had, believe it or not, a Jewish Cuban community on St. Nicholas Avenue up in the 190s. They owned all the restaurants and the jewelry shops. And you still had the Irish up in Inwood. So it was an eclectic place to work, but it was a busy place to work. Heavy narcotics, lots of violence associated with the narcotics. As I said, once I got into anti-crime, we couldn't get through a set without getting shot at. They knew who we were, even in plain clothes. We had to ditch the car 2 blocks away just to sneak up on a location. Oh, they were the boys. That's a team photo. Shortly, I think that's 1993. It was taken because I see I have my hair cut already. That appeared in New York Magazine. It's we're sitting on the hood of the unmarked, and if in the background you can't see it, is the George Washington Bridge. It's a pretty great photo. But those are the boys. That's the local motion team.
Mike, around that period, the 3-4 was leading the city in homicides for several years in a row, if I'm not mistaken.
In 1991, we had what was a record at the time, 131 homicides in the precinct.
I remember that.
And we used to, we had a friendly bet going with the 7-5 anti-crime every year over who was going to lead the city in homicides. I never had to buy the 7-5 dinner. They bought our dinner. So it was nuts. The only thing that actually cooled the homicide number up there were the riots and the police presence in 1992. If those riots don't happen, if they don't flood the area with the police, we would have surpassed 1991's record numbers. And it was crazy.
Well, Mike, so to the extent that you're comfortable, talk us through what happened that day.
Yeah, I mean, it was interestingly enough, we weren't even necessarily looking to get on the sheet to make a collar. But I'm sitting in the back seat of the unmarked. My partner, Tom McPartland, is driving. Matt Bradisani's in the front passenger seat. And at the corner of 162nd Street and St. Nick, I look over and there's a guy inappropriately dressed because it was like 104 degrees and humid. And he's wearing a sport jacket. And his chin is on a swivel like he's coked out of his mind. And he keeps grabbing the lapel of the jacket and pulling it over his waist. Now, you can see something big was under there, but I'm not going to be able to make the shape through tinted windows. I want to get a better look. So I alert my partners. We know we're not going to be able to use the car to jump him because everybody knew the car. We had a logo on the back. It's a surfboard wax called Local Motion. It's the way that we got our nickname. And all the bad guys knew it. So what we decided to do, and we had done this in the past, is I was going to get out and just camp out on the corner and keep an eye on the guy. Because I never got made back then. I had a long head of rock star hair, 4 earrings, a goatee. And I had learned the secret, just don't make eye contact with anybody and they don't think you're the police. Nobody in their right mind makes eye contact with someone in Washington Heights unless they're looking to get shot or they're the police. Or both, possibly both. So I get out and I'm watching them. And the plan is they're going to come around from Broadway and up 162nd Street. And if it holds to form, when the call goes up, agua bajando, policia, the guy's going to walk directly in my direction. I'm going to put him on the wall. We're going to, the three of us are going to meet. We're going to take the gun off him, hook him up, and then we're back in the station house. Except he doesn't walk in my direction. He walks toward the building, which I later find out is 505 West 162nd Street. Didn't know the address then, and that created other problems. And unbeknownst to me, as Tommy and Matt were coming up the block, a guy with a 357 runs out in front of the car in front of them. They think he's coming for me. So they get out and chase him. So I don't have any backup. When I catch this guy at the doorway of the building and I identify myself, pull the shield out from under my vest, policía no se mueve. Rather than comply, he elbows me in the throat. And since I'm holding on to him, when he backs up into that hallway, we are gone.
Yep.
We end up rolling around, fighting for his gun. And when we get into the hallway proper, it's just great big marble enclosure, more like a mausoleum than anything else, which is fitting because once I got in there, I didn't think I was coming out alive. He was big, he was tough, he was coked out of his mind, and he hit like a sledgehammer. But I held on and we kept fighting, careening from the floor to the wall. At one point, I lose the radio, which it didn't really matter because I kept putting over bad addresses. Nobody could find me. The radio was in pandemonium. People scream, cursing, "Where the fuck are you?" I don't know.
Yeah.
Best I could do was 162 in Amsterdam, and that's a block away from where I was. At one point, he manages to free his gun from his waistband, and he gets it up in my face, and now I wrestle it away from him. And we're continuing to fight and scramble. He manages to get up, and here's the other thing. We fought for 5 whole minutes. The time is on the 911 recordings. If you've ever been in a fight for even a minute, you know how exhausting that is. Yeah. 5 minutes is an eternity.
Yes, it is.
Particularly in 100-degree weather. He ends up breaking away from me and heading to the back of the hallway. And when I grab him and spin him around by his jacket, the first thing that comes up in my face is his gun. And it's literally in front of my nose. I grab his hand. But at this point, we're both busted open. We're bleeding. We're sweating. We are a mess. We have kicked the shit out of each other. I managed to pull his hand away from me, but I could feel it slipping right away. And as soon as his wrist slipped out of my hand, I turned my body a little, pulled out my revolver, pushed it out, and just as his gun crossed the front of my face, I let 2 go in his chest. He goes down. So now I'm thinking, all right, I got to cuff him. But I'm so exhausted, I can't get his hands behind his back. So I in the front cuff him. And now the first thing I do is scoop up and grab his weapon because we don't want that to do to Brooklyn Bounce.
Yeah.
You think I had problems? Imagine if the gun had not been recovered.
That's right.
You know, then the riots would have been something even worse.
For sure.
So now people are still screaming, "Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?" I'm like, I gotta find my radio and find out. So I grabbed the radio and I put over a bad address again. And I'm like, oh Jesus. So now I gotta leave him in the hallway and go out to the front door and look up for the address. And then I put over 505 West 162. I got a perp down. I go back. And I'm huffing and puffing over him, and I'm probably zoning out. And the first two guys that come in are in uniform are Johnny D'Alessandro and Billy Nolan. Great radio team. Billy ended up a sergeant on the job in the 4-6, and Johnny ended up first grader in the 3-4 squad. So these are super cops. When they come running in and they see me, evidently I'm a mess because they start trying to peel my clothing off. I'm like, I'm not hit. They're like, what about all the blood? I'm like, I guess it's his. Actually, a lot of it was mine, but I hadn't been shot. And then they looked at the gun, and it was clearly not a police gun. I'm like, yeah, that's his. I'm holding on to that. And they grabbed me just as everybody was coming in and whisked me to the hospital, which was interesting because when EMS took him and he was in the next room next to me. And I actually listened to what was going on in the crash room with him. So I knew, I guess before anybody, that he had expired. And it was just a shooting investigation at that point. It's a justified shooting. It's a gun collar, one of more than 100 that I had made at that point. This didn't look like it should have been anything too difficult to deal with. But I didn't take politics into consideration. So,
but what happened, Mike? What changed this from every other officer involved shooting, where everything is good, the guns recovered? What happened? What's the linchpin that makes this thing go sideways?
David Dinkins owed the Dominican drug cartel for getting him elected in the first place. I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of fraud in that election against Koch. Koch basically got submarined by his own party. Now I call them the Dominican drug cartel. They were actually, I believe, called the twofold Dominican Grocers Association and I believe the Dominican Cab Drivers Association.
Yes, Fernando Mateo.
Yeah, right. So these were Dinkins was basically going to pay off what he owed with this, and he was going to back their play. When they started rioting, he took their side right from the jump, and pretty much, I mean, he wanted my head on a stick, and kind of almost called me a murderer in the media. So, you know, I was when it first went bad, and I'm home and I'm watching it on TV, and it's on every channel, 24/7, and my brother said to me, he says, is this going to be a problem for you? I said, it depends on how good they can lie. He's like, oh.
So you knew something was brewing before it really hit the fan.
I was pretty sure I was going to be indicted for murder. Best case scenario, I was probably going to take me 2 years to beat it at trial. But then, you know, the other thing, when you're going in front of a Manhattan trial, and at that point, with the administration in place then, I'm not going into that trial as the good guy. So there's a possibility that if the DA, if he didn't have the integrity of Robert Morgenthau, they might have been able to throw so much shit at the wall that some of it might have stuck. So, I was getting ready to go to prison.
Like, wasn't there a girl who also lied?
No, not a girl, 2 women. Okay. And this is actually a hero story. The night of the shooting, Mike Sheehan and John Lafferty, Stopped up in the 3-4 on their way back from a homicide in the 2-4. They were in Manhattan North homicide. And they asked Huey, you need anything for the case? And Huey tells them the same thing he told me. Nah, it's a bunt. You guys could pack it in. And they're like, we're here. We'll go do a canvas. And the way they used to do canvases, these two guys anyway, they went out with the Polaroid and they took a picture of everyone they spoke to. And they took detailed notes, who they're talking to, the time. And both of these women who later came out as alleged witnesses told them they weren't even on the block or in Manhattan when the shooting went down. They came home to find a crime scene in their hallway. So when they now come into the district attorney's office to tell their story, the detectives are like, no, we talked to them. They weren't even in Manhattan. Ultimately, only one of them testified in the grand jury. The other one wouldn't come in, reading the handwriting on the wall. I was actually, after everything was cleared, I was given the choice by the district attorney's office. What do you want us to do with this woman? We'll get her for perjury, but we're going to have to expose a confidential informant to do it. I'm like, well, I don't want to expose anyone. I want to give that guy, the confidential informant, I want to give him a kiss. I don't care what happens to her. Just throw her out of the country. She doesn't belong here. I don't know that they ever did, but
I think for our, I'm sorry, Mike, I think for our audience and, those who are cops but never detectives and who might know, and then the civilian and non-law enforcement folks, like, the bread and butter of detective work, especially on a caper this big and this important and this serious, it may be considered grunt work, but the canvas. And there's an old term, it's an acronym, I can't remember it off the time of it, but get off your ass and knock on doors. And and not only did they do that for you, and for the city and for the job as well, because this is, it's not just Michael Keefe, it's the department, it's the city, and good hardworking people don't deserve that. But it's the details and the extra effort that they went through with the photographs. That's not common. And how many times, Pete, you were there, you were a detective, Bronx homicide, Mike, you know it. How many times did you read a canvas DD5 or an information follow-up where they put NA, not applicable, unknown, no answer, and really shoddy work? So credit to those guys for doing really good, top-notch detective work. That's great to hear. And for those who are aspiring to be detectives and those who are currently detectives now, knock on those doors, finesse your way into that apartment, get the names, get the photographs, document exactly what they say, word for word. Yep. Don't just put NA or they didn't have anything to say, anything to report.
I'll go one further, Tommy. Go back and canvas again, because sometimes people won't open the door because they're afraid because there's too many eyes on what's going on. And they might open the door if you go back the next day or the following day. But you're entirely correct. It's old school gumshoe police work, man.
Yeah, they call them shoe leather investigations.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, all the homicides that I've investigated, I saw more of them wearing out shoes than I did getting DNA hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
sure,
yeah, those John and Mike.
So Mike Sheehan, just so everyone knows, that is the Mike Sheehan.
The
correct?
Mike Sheehan. My hero and my mentor. Same with John Lafferty. John Lafferty was a brilliant detective and also one of the nicest gentlemen you would ever meet.
Yeah, so Mike Sheehan, for those of you who don't know, top-notch first grade detective, also Manhattan North homicide, right, by the time he retired, and then went on to be a local news reporter in New York City. And Fox 5 News, and just a legend, larger-than-life character. Also worked on the Robert Chambers, Jennifer Levin case, his infamy, and then if my memory serves me, didn't he work on the Central Park 5?
He did.
Yep, he worked on that. He was the kind of guy that just got confessions.
He was a gentleman. He was a great guy.
He'd just sit down and talk with you. He never raised his voice. Never got tired. Just kept talking. I mean, there's an old expression: he could talk the balls off a brass monkey. Yeah, that's really what a good interrogator does. I am going to wear you down until you are so sick of lying to me, you're just going to tell me. So I'll go away. Yeah. And it works.
Yeah. All right. So they do a great job. They really help out with doing thorough, stellar detective work. What's going on with you, Mike? You're sitting there. You're worried you're going to get indicted. You're going to go to trial. It sounds like you've already thought about what your next 2 years looks like in this journey. Walk us through that, and who was there for you? Who stepped up? Who put their careers and their lives on the line? And who were the ones that sold out and looked the other way?
Well, it's unfair. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's fair. Maybe it's unfair. The police department, for the most part, didn't hurt me. But I was told in no uncertain terms that they're going to sit this one out. This is the DA's investigation. Good luck, young man. However, the detectives who were still working with the district attorney's office on the actual shooting continued to do their job. They would stand up. They did a great investigation. And they proved, along with the investigators from the DA's office, the impossibility of my guilt. With respect to bosses, they were like, they were just waiting for me to go away. I was like the gum on your shoe. You just got to wait to wear off. And that was it. And they had me on the bench. I was working in the borough of Manhattan North. After a week, they wouldn't let me answer the phones anymore. Largely because I read the handwriting on the wall, and I had no time for a follow-up question. If you called me to break my balls over nonsense information that I got to write in a log, you don't get to ask me a follow-up question. Right. There's no need for it. So it got basically, the boss got tired of me telling captains to go fuck themselves. So they're like, you don't get to answer the phone anymore. I'm like, all right. I wouldn't wear a uniform because technically I'm still an anti-crime. So as the weather got warmer through that July, I was wearing less and less clothing. Cut off shorts, cut off tank top, flip-flops, and a gun tucked into my waist. And that was it. And I spent 8 hours a day working in that borough, either lifting weights in the basement or suntanning on the roof. Because I was convinced I was going to jail and I was going to be tan and jacked when I got there. So that was my mindset. I was pretty much ready for the worst.
Were you more concerned about the Manhattan DA's office prosecuting you for the murder or the civil rights investigation with the FBI? Because I know the FBI.
The problem is I didn't find out about the civil rights investigation until I had already finally got into the detective bureau. Funny story. I had done a sub rosa contract through. I don't know if you remember Cocktail Jack.
Yeah, Jack Walsh. Of course.
Jack told me, no way is this going to fly, but I'll do the contract to get you into the 4-6 squad. I was supposed to go up to the 4-6 squad and work with Paddy Brosnan.
I know Paddy very well. We were workout partners back in the early 90s.
Yeah. I mean, they even had a nameplate for my desk made for me. They were so sure I was going to come there. And when the orders came down, I was assigned to the 4-6 squad for 13 minutes. And a telephone message came into the borough rescinding it. Turns out it was Ray Kelly himself. Now, I don't know who did it. Like, I knew it was going to get kiboshed anyway. It's the same Dominican cartel in the 4-6 as the 3-4. I'm sure they don't want me lighting any more of them up. So it made sense, but I still wanted to understand why. And I had a pretty good relationship with Chief Salvaggi, who was he was a Manhattan North commander when the shooting went down, and after that he was the chief of patrol. But for some reason he had a sweet spot for my mother. So he used to call, see how everybody was doing. It was very touching. It was sweet. And my mother thought he was wonderful and handsome. So I call him up. I'm like, hey, listen, Chief, I have no complaints. I'll go be a detective anywhere. But I got to know, I had this contract for the 4-6, and it got shot down. It lasted all of 13 minutes. He goes, all right, I'll find out. I'll call you back. So he calls me back that night at home, and he's laughing. He goes, you really pick fights with the wrong people, don't you? I'm like, I don't know. What are you talking about? He goes, yeah, that was Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly actually made the telephone message to have you move to Queens. He said, and I quote, Mike O'Keefe will work in the 4-6 squad when monkeys fly out of my ass. So,
oh man.
And I ended up, I refer to it as being taken hostage. I spent 3 years in the 108 squad, which, don't get me wrong, there are wonderful people there. I got to do some really cool police work, just not enough of it. I was coming from the 3-4 in the early 90s to a neighborhood I used to hang out in. Well, the bars on Woodside, like, that's a good place to drink and shop and go out to dinner, but that's no place to be a crime fighter. So once a week, I would go down to Queens Detectives, and I put a 57 on the chief's desk. You're like, just go back there. Go back to Queens.
Yeah, people are asking.
It took Joe Esposito and his 11-foot pole to get me back to the barrio. We had become friends when he became the CO of the 3-4. Johnny Moynihan, my partner, put us together because Joe's career was very similar. He actually almost got indicted by a bad DA in Brooklyn when he was an anti-crime in the 8-3. And I run into him at a racket, and I guess I had a puss on. And he asked me, what's the matter with you? I says, you want to know what's the matter with me? If I don't get out of that make-believe borough and that coward of a chief, I'm taking him fucking hostage. That's what's wrong with me. And he laughed. He goes, you want to come to the 8-3 and work in my rep? I'm like, if I can make robbery collars in Woodside, don't you think I can do it on Knickerbocker Avenue? He says, yeah, I know. That's why I'm asking for you. 3 weeks later, I was in the 8-3. The contract nobody would do, Joe Esposito did for me.
And so for those listeners who are listening, he was the commanding officer of the 8-3 precinct, which is in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And he eventually worked his way to the executive officer of Brooklyn Patrol Borough, Brooklyn North. And he then became the commanding officer of Brooklyn North. And then he made and retired. And he was the longest running. He still might be the longest. I think he's
the longest serving chief of department in the history of the NYPD.
Yep. And he was a detective. Yep, and the most beloved for sure. Yeah. He was a detective. He was a sergeant in the detective squad. The shooting I was aware of, for sure. So you had a good rabbi, my friend.
Oh, the best, only the best. I was his Irish stepson. And it needs to be said, Joe ended up dying of 9/11 related brain cancer. And it really shouldn't come as a surprise. He never left Ground Zero from the day of the attack. He pretty much ran the job from down there at Ground Zero. So if anybody was exposed to the toxins, it was Joe. And you know what? He was a smart guy. He knew what he was doing. My hat's off to him. That's courage. When you know you're going to be in a toxic environment, and your people need you so you don't leave. That's the definition of heroism.
He told me that he told me he had not slept a solid night from 9/11 until shortly before he passed. I mean, it really weighed on him heavily.
Yeah.
Good man.
Yep. Okay, so you're out of the 3-4. You go to the 4-6. You're there for 13 minutes. You end up in the 108.
I was only figuratively at the 4-6. I never actually got to set foot in it.
Hey, 13 minutes is 13 minutes, buddy.
I spent 3 years in the 108. I actually had my shield held up for a year because of the federal investigation.
Gotcha.
Which was interesting because when I finally did get promoted, all of the back time that was owed me and back seniority, I got right away. I got a nice retro check out of that. And what was interesting is if you go by the calendar date that I got my shield to the time that I got second grade a couple of years later in the 8-3, I wasn't even a top pay as a detective yet. So when the second grade came down, I was doing great work, but there were guys that were detectives for 20 years who weren't even on the grid.
Yeah.
So it was a little uncomfortable.
You went through a lot, Mike. You went through a lot.
And that was explained to me. As a matter of fact, my zone captain who put me in was Charlie Dowd. And when I questioned him on it, he says, "Are you questioning my judgment?" I'm like, "Oh, is that what it sounded like?" "No, Captain, I did not do that."
Chuck Dowd's good friend, eventually retired as assistant chief in the job. Good man as well. So, but let's go back a little bit because then we're going to use the next question to segue into some topic. Let's talk about the riots. So what happened up in Washington Heights in 92? What set it off? And how did it stop?
What set it off was the media showed up. And they never did. They never went up to Washington Heights. They'd like take a phone call from somebody in the detective squad or the precinct and just make notes and write their articles that way. Now they actually show up with full TV crews and microphones. Yep. And they start putting microphones in front of all the rioters who just felt like spewing something, which is the first time I was called a murderer, a thief, a land pirate. I like that one. Yeah, that's just pretty much, they slandered me. The media gave them the opportunity to slander me. All the print media, one bad story after another. They were taking tips from people that turned out to be cartel employees. Now, the interesting thing is, as heavily populated as Washington Heights is, the rioters weren't from Washington Heights. The cartel was actually paying people $50 a day to come up and riot.
Well, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, they were burning cars. They were, as a matter of fact, they burned up a fireman. They firebombed his ladder truck, and I felt terrible about that. And that's basically when they started putting cops on rooftops just to prevent that sort of thing from happening. That's just sick. Why are you firebombing a fireman? They didn't help you. I mean, I get the resentment for the police. We're locking you up. The fireman's just putting the fire out.
So I'll answer that question. If anyone knows, and are you guys familiar with the Idaho firefighters that were ambushed about 2 weeks ago? They were shot and killed. So this is about radicals just doing radical things and causing mayhem. And I'll be honest with you, Mike, I did not know about the cartel part of bringing in rioters, and I am blown away right now that we're living 33 years later. It's the same thing. We have not learned our lessons.
No, as a matter of fact, George Soros probably took his lessons from the Washington Heights riots.
There you go. Yep.
But as you said, the way that it ended, there was such a police presence up there. The riots continued. Dinkins would not let anybody put hands on anyone. Just let them vent. Let them vent. He didn't learn from Crown Heights the summer before. What happens is when you let them vent, they just keep pushing that envelope until somebody dies. In this case, they maimed the fireman, the firefighter. But what absolutely ended it, what ended the rioting, was when the Democratic Party told Dinkins if he didn't quash this riot, he was going to lose his Democratic National Convention and they're going to take it to Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, David Dinkins was a crime fighter. And he told Ray Kelly, crush this, crush it now. And they did. There was still a lot of people on the street all the way up until the No True Bill came down in early September. But the riots were just not going to reignite again. If anything, what had happened is the cartel said, well, we thought we could get them to back off, but there's more of them here than there ever were. And they're actually getting to us. Right. So it's the cartel themselves that basically told, A, they stopped paying rioters, and B, they basically told the dealers who were responsible for all the violence. The way that the cartel up in Washington Heights worked is they were strictly a supply side. And they let these mutts, these criminals from San Francisco to Marguerite come down and fight over the territory. That's why all the bodies were in the street. Because nobody set up any kind of structure and say, that's your spot, that's your spot, that's your spot. After the riots went down and they learned, they took a more hands-on approach. All of a sudden, the spots moved inside. There was nothing on the street. There were price controls. Everybody had to sell for the same amount of money. There was, and it was made very plain that if you engaged in violence, you were going to be taken off the sheet. In this case, I'm not sure where they were dumping the bodies. It might have been over, but it wasn't in New York. It was in New Jersey. So a couple of people disappeared, and everybody else got the message.
Well, I thought San Pedro de Macorís was famous for shortstops.
Shortstops and hitmen.
Okay. All right.
I think for the people that listening who aren't from New York, I mean, I don't think they realize, like, if you ran into Kilo's, it was Washington Heights. There or Jackson Heights, you know, the Colombians. Home invasions. The 3-4 was the home invasion capital of New York City, even a decade after your incident, Mike. So,
yeah, we got famous making home invasion robberies and anti-crime.
Yeah.
And invariably, we ended up locking up the victims for A1 dope also.
Sure. I almost never saw
7 kilos in the apartment that were getting robbed.
Yeah, I almost never saw kilo weight in the Bronx. But I saw plenty of it in Washington Heights when we had spillover cases that went into Washington Heights. So I mean, it was no man's land over there. It was crazy.
Yeah, the Manhattan North Narcotics used to refer to chasing the kilo fairy, and I didn't understand what the big deal was, because on late tours in uniform, I made a 7 kilo collar on the street. Guy had a shopping bag with 7 kilos, 2 guns, and about $10,000 of money. And when I got him and I put the handcuffs on him, he kept looking over his shoulder, begging me to kill him.
Yeah.
And he explained, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill my family back in the Dominican Republic. Yeah. I'm a dead man. Just kill me now. Yeah. And ultimately, I think the DEA, it was the height of task force back then. I think they ended up flipping him because it was the only chance he had to live. But it was like, you know, I'd hear these narcotics detectives, I'm going to get a kilo up here one day. I'm like, yeah, great. Tell somebody who cares. I just want to steal.
So, Mike, the riots get quashed, but you and I talked the other day, and you felt that if they didn't intervene and they just let it going, it could have turned into what we saw in 2020 in Minneapolis, and then which eventually extended all the way out. So what are your feelings on that? And then let's get an assessment on that, on how it was taken down, stopped, all the other violence prevented, and then let's get into 2020 and the summer of love.
The summer of love. Yeah, well, I mean, I was fortunate. If it had been present day New York, Alvin Bragg just would have indicted me for murder and just let the chips fall where they may. There was no question in my mind it would have gone that way. He's proven that that's how he operates. When I saw what happened in Minneapolis, and it happened actually before Minneapolis, it was the first time it stepped out. I believe it was when Michael Brown tried to kill that police officer with his own gun, and the media completely misrepresented what occurred. That guy was on a rampage. He was a 17-year-old rhinoceros who was rampaging. And if the cop didn't do the right thing and protect himself, he would have died with his own firearm. That was in Missouri. And the rioting started, and I think it set a template for later on, because in Minneapolis, it was exactly the same thing with the George Floyd incident. It was as if they were working off an established playbook now.
Right. So we're looking at 2014 is Ferguson, Missouri. Right. And like you said, this kid goes in, steals a Twinkie, but it turns into a big robbery, violence, beats up the owner, walks down the street. Derek, the police officer's name is Derek. It was Michael Brown was the victim.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say that I don't remember the name. And it was hands up, don't shoot. For all of you who remember, that was hands up, don't shoot. That was a lie. So, yeah. Mike, what's consistent with your caper and this caper? Lies. They're lying. Mm-hmm. They're constantly lying. Cops are the scapegoats. They're the pawns in these games, and it's life and death decisions. This comes down to the community. They think they're doing a favor to the community. They're hurting their communities. So go ahead.
Well, the thing about it is the people that are doing all the rioting, even after the George Floyd incident, Those people don't live there. They don't care about the stores they're burning down or the property they're destroying or the people that they're hurting because they don't live there. They're there just to rage. And the problem is you have these liberal DAs who will not prosecute riots. You need to effectively arrest people and incarcerate them for that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Darren Wilson was the cop, by the way.
Darren, okay, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look, the woke prosecutor didn't exist in our time. It didn't exist till like the last 10 years. And I tell you what, it's a cancer. It's funny. When I was in Arizona, I worked with George Gascon when he was a police chief. And he actually seemed like a good guy. He was eager to talk about the chase the night before, the arrests. Then he went to San Francisco first, then Los Angeles as a DA. Turned into a completely different human being. I have zero respect for the man now. But yeah, these woke DAs are killing public safety, frankly.
Well, they're on the wane now. Even with all the backing of people like George Soros, people are vetting their district attorney candidates a little closer because they don't want to be Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco.
Thank God.
They don't want to be that city. Do you?
Of course. No, I agree. Thank God they're woken up and
Well, they're not all the way awake. We got to keep nudging them. But they're coming to understand George Soros is not a friend of this country.
Or his own country. They hate him in Hungary, where he's from. He's despised there.
Whatever. Yeah, well, you know what? It doesn't surprise me that he's despised in Hungary. I think that's kind of a universal thing for him. He's probably been hated everywhere he's ever been.
Yeah, Viktor Orban, I believe, is the president or whatever their title is. I think he's exiled. But again, the consistent
if I could backtrack a little bit, Tom, because this is an important point, and it pretty much set the stage for the Summer of Love, because despite all of the evidence, overwhelming evidence exonerating that cop in Missouri, even after the grand jury spoke, Obama went on TV and called it an outrage. When the president of the United States doesn't respect the rule of law, why does anybody else have a responsibility to? And I got to be honest with you, we were on the verge when Barack Obama was elected president. We were on the verge in this country of becoming a post-racial country. It just didn't matter anymore. And then Barack Obama and Eric Holder decide they're going to make every conversation about race and pitting people against each other simply because of the way that they look. The damage that those two did to this country, it's right up there with treason, in my opinion.
Well, I don't disagree with you that they were complicit in actually executing that. If you take the incident in Boston that Barack Obama, the president, divided us with by calling the cops stupid and it was unnecessary. It's really bad. We'll segue into the Eric Holder DOJ perfectly. Let's wrap up Summer of Love. Let's do a couple of little comments on Summer of Love and what's actually happened in Minneapolis. I want to bring your attention to a quote that I found doing the research this week. Mother Jones on June 1st wrote, "The Summer of Love is 2020 is going to be long, violent, and necessary." Who are these people rooting for in the sense of where or any other city that fell in the summer of 2020? Where's the African American community? Where's the Hispanic community? Where's any other community that benefited from anything that happened during that entire debacle?
Tommy, let's not forget the young lady who ran against Donald Trump for the presidency this last election cycle arranged a bail fund for the people who were rioting during the Summer of Love. And she said they should stay out there. So, yeah, I mean, they basically wiped their backside with law and order. And to what end, I really still don't understand. But, yeah, I mean, it's appalling.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead, Mike.
To make a comment on Mother Jones, that's a magazine that was launched, I believe, in the 60s by potheads and LSD heads.
Well, there you go.
So you have to consider your source. You know, you really can't be surprised that comment came from them. They probably have too many chromosomes from all the drugs they did.
So I want to pull up some stats. Let's talk about this. So check this out. So if you track on this stats from 2015, the gun violence of deaths, and this is the source of this is gunviolence.org. So it is directional. It's not absolute. They don't get full, complete stats recording, but you can see the spike in 2020. And I put an annotation for COVID and the George Floyd riots in 2020. It's actually, that's showing the beginning of 2020. It actually moves later. You can see the ascension, but things were brewing from 2019 to 2020, and then they went up that year. And then even though they're all touting crime reductions and homicide reductions from 2020 to 2025, they're still significantly higher than they were in 2015. And so I'm sorry, but until you get sub 2015, you're still not done with your work across this country in any of these police departments. What do you guys think?
Well, the other thing that you have to look at with respect to statistics, the local statistics, if they're being compiled locally, are going to look rosier than they really are. Well, at this point now, the DOJ is in different hands, but even the FBI, their crime statistics were more accurate than local crime statistics, but still had a political slant to them. All right. Winston Churchill once said, there are three kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damn lies, and then there are statistics. None of this means anything. Use your eye. Your naked eye will tell you it is a violent society because it was allowed to get out of control. We're moving, it seems, in the right direction, but that's only because we have different people in charge now. In cities like New York, in cities like Philadelphia, Los Angeles, San Francisco, things are not getting better. They're not getting better because no one is putting their foot down and saying, I'm the adult and you're going to behave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's another factor too. I think that, look, some of the treatments that are administered in the field for gunshot injuries are better than what we had back in our day too. Quick clot, for example, you have medics carrying quick clot and certain things.
Yeah, all of the meatball surgery that came back from Afghanistan and Iraq went right to work on the streets in New York. There were people who should have, well, I shouldn't say should have, would have died without these revolutionary treatments. Remember the first time you saw somebody put on a pair of the plasma pants?
Yeah.
I had a shooting victim in Washington Heights while I was in anti-crime, and they're slipping these pants on him. Like, you're taking him scuba diving, he's bleeding out. They're like, no, the pants are going to stop the bleeding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an example of the type of, and the effect that it had to bring homicides down. Didn't bring down shootings, though, just homicides.
Right.
Yeah. So check out this chart, guys. Officer involved shooting, suspects killed, 2015, 2024. So all of their rioting, you know what? It's got them an extra 400 people per year shot and killed by the police because the police, and that's a number, in my opinion, with a disengaged law enforcement community across the country. Imagine if they were engaged. Imagine what that number be. We, meaning cops, would be involved in shooting cases that would be twice this number, maybe 3 times this number. But the Ferguson effect is real from 2014, 2020, and now. Cops are disengaged, and they're still killing 400 more people a year. And there was a steady, I'm familiar with this data, there was a steady 20-year flow that hovered around 1,000 people per year, regardless of the 34 million calls for service and blah, 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 whatever that was. That number, for some weird reason, hovered around 900, 800, 1,000, 1,100, and it fluctuated there. 2015, 1,000, which was consistent prior to that, and then look at that skyrocket. This is a hands-off police department stat like you've never seen. They say they care about the community. They hate the community. They have contempt for the community.
No argument there.
Okay. How about the Mets? Come on, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
No spoilers. I'm taping the game.
All right. Summer of Love, wrapping up there. I mean, Minneapolis was a beautiful city. Wonderful. If you talk to anyone who lives there, knows it. It's the shell of itself. And you know who suffered the most? Minority small business owners. Crushed, and out of business. Keith Ellison is a carpetbagger. Walls is a nut job. And Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, from Virginia. They're not even from there.
And they don't care.
Yeah. Hence the term carpetbaggers.
Yes, sir. All right, Mike. So listen, we talked about, I'm going to switch the tables. We're going to let you grill Pete. You said you were interested in hearing.
Yeah, I actually have a question, and it's never been addressed in anything I've read about Operation Fast and Furious.
Okay.
Now, it's clear that the Justice Department was giving guns to the Mexican cartel, and those guns were being used against American citizens, and they weren't tracking them. They disappeared. My question is, what the hell were they trying to do in the first place? If you're not tracking the guns, why are you giving them to your enemies? Pete, you're muted.
Serial number. Am I muted? So anyway,
you're back.
Yeah, you could trace the serial number and find out where that gun was purchased. So what was going on for years when I was in Arizona is the dealers would call us when there was a suspicious transaction happening. We would roll out to the location. They would hold off, like they would say there was a problem with the paperwork or something. And when they knew we were outside, they would hand the guns to traffickers. We would stop those cars, ask questions, get these guys in lies, find some other evidence, seize the guns. Very, very few people were going to prison because the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona was lazy and incompetent. So, but what happened is in 2009, the end of 2009, my group's focus was changed to home invasion robberies because Phoenix became the capital of home invasions to the United States. And a new group took over that role of Mexico-bound firearms trafficking. So instead of stopping the cars and asking the questions like we did, they let the sales take place and would just document the license plate and follow the gun to an address and then go home. Instead of hitting the door with a search warrant, go home. And what they were doing is they were letting those guns get trafficked into Mexico. And what was happening is they were tracing those guns and they were putting pinpoints on maps. So, and they were then trying to tie those locations to cartel activity. The problem is Mexican police aren't like police here. They're not proactive, at all. So when those guns are being recovered, they're being recovered at crime scenes, which means they're being recovered next to dead bodies, sometimes the bodies of dead Mexican cops. So their goal was to try to put all these little pins on maps and then be able to go after these straw purchasers who are purchasing guns for other people, which is what a straw purchaser is by definition, right? And then take down a cartel, which is asinine to even think that could happen because the straw purchasing laws are weak as fuck. And the guns are in Mexico, and the people who were the real criminals that they're looking for are cartel members in Mexico. So then what happens is Brian Terry, a Border Patrol agent, gets killed with a gun that gets traced to one of the straw purchasers in that case. Now you're going to love this, brother. That straw purchaser, who the U.S. Attorney's Office was intimately involved in this case, that straw purchaser bought 900 firearms, and they were nowhere near getting ready to indict him because they didn't think they had a serious enough case yet. Not 901 fell swoop either, over the course of about a year that they were working this case. So when Brian Terry gets killed, they start panicking and they indict that straw purchaser and they make some arrests. And then an agent in that group blew the whistle. But their plan was to basically try to take down the cartel by abandoning basic police work and stopping cars, asking questions. So the big problem is, ATF got their ass kicked for this, and they deserved it. But the U.S. Attorney's Office in Phoenix were equal participants. They were co-architects of that strategy. None of them were held accountable. In fact, I wrote a book about this. One of the people who, again, set the tone, kind of paved the path for Fast and Furious to happen, just resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office March 31st of this year. The prosecutor who was the lead prosecutor on Fast and Furious is still working at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I'll go one step further because there's another part of that case that most people don't know about. We were investigating a guy who was making grenades for the Sinaloa cartel. And he was taking the parts from the United States, smuggling them into Mexico, and making the grenades in Mexico. Now, it's not illegal to have those parts in the United States. The only crime is getting caught crossing the border with them. So we told the U.S. Attorney's Office we want to grab him crossing the border. They said, we're not going to prosecute it. So anyway, he gets caught by a CBP, Customs and Border Protection, crossing the border with 114 disassembled grenades hidden in his tires. So they X-ray his vehicle. So now they don't know if they're live or not live. So you know this, you're a cop. They have to shut down the port now, call in the bomb squad, do render safe, rip the tires off the car. The cartel bosses are on the other side watching this happen. This guy comes in, he confesses to what's going on, and we call the U.S. Attorney's Office, like, let him go. Like, are you kidding me? So we even called U.S. Attorney's Office in New York because they were working a case on the Sinaloa cartel. They asked them if they could adopt him into their case, and they were like, well, we might need a wire transfer or something through New York. They were willing to look at it. In Arizona, they didn't give a shit. So lo and behold, after fighting with the U.S. Attorney's Office there, with several confessions, this guy's at this point begging us, hey, man, you got to lock me up because they saw what happened. If you let me go, I'm a dead man. Let him go. So we eventually had Mexico hit his place in Culiacan, which is in Sinaloa, a shithole. Yeah. And when they arrested him down there, he had enough components on hand to make 1,000 hand grenades, right? And he also had all the machinery that he was using to take the AK-47 variant rifles, which are semi-automatic rifles here in the United States, and the AR-15s, which are semi-automatic rifles, and turn them into fully automatic machine guns in Mexico. U.S. Attorney's Office wanted nothing to do with it. So, again, they tried to take down a cartel with the U.S. Attorney's Office. It would be the equivalent of taking like a little kid that watches football from like the top of the bleachers and then asking him to go quarterback the Super Bowl, allowing this U.S. Attorney's Office to try to quarterback that case. It was just a complete disaster.
I'll give you a better police metaphor for that.
Go ahead.
Okay. You needed kick-ass street cops for that operation.
Yeah.
Instead, they decided that they were going to make pin maps and be admin guys.
Right.
As you guys know, in the NYPD, you can't damn anyone with fainter praise than to call him a good admin guy.
No, it's true.
That's the guy you're like, yeah, stay behind that desk because now you're not in my way.
Yeah, but a good coach will always tell you. I mean, we played sports.
Yeah.
They always beat you up when you forgot the fundamentals. The fundamentals. These people that were involved in that case forgot the fundamentals of policing. They wouldn't stop cars. They wouldn't ask questions. It was all document. And in the end, it cost a Border Patrol agent his life and thousands of Mexicans their life. Now, 2,200 guns were trafficked to part of that case. I know over 1,000 remain unrecovered. So, look, they're not loaves of bread. They're not apples. They don't rot. They don't biodegrade. Long after I'm dead, if I die an old man, people will be getting killed on the other end of Fast and Furious guns.
All right. Well, here's some good news. You're talking about people still under the employ of the federal government who were guilty of this malfeasance. Supreme Court today just came down. Trump can fire anyone he wants now.
Some people deserve to be fired, brother. In federal government, it takes an act of God to get rid of a bad
Not anymore. The president can fire you. So we're back to the rule of law on that anyway.
Yeah, that was a mess. And yeah, look, the other thing, Eric Holder was the U.S. They lied. They denied they knew anything about it. I know for a fact that Hope McAllister, the case agent, and her boss flew to Chicago to brief him on Fast and Furious long before it turned into a scandal. And then, look, no one was held accountable. A couple ATF people were fired. A couple were forced to retire. None of the lawyers were touched. Yeah. The lawyers, man, different class.
It's funny how that works, huh?
Yeah. Sad.
Law degree is a cape.
Yeah, indeed.
That was my big question. I'm like, what the hell was on their mind?
Idiocy.
Now I know. Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Stupidity.
We're going to put cards to the board and say success.
Right.
Well, I think like Eric Holder being the only AG ever held in contempt, Obama invoked executive privilege. It's really shameful.
Tommy, let's think about this. Like Eric Holder said he was Obama's wingman. Now, if you remember, Obama said he found out about Fast and Furious when he read about it in the newspapers like everybody else, right? If you're the president and there's a scandal brewing during your time when you're in that Oval Office, what kind of wingman doesn't warn you, hey, sir, this is coming. You might want to get out in front of this. So some wingman. But he wasn't my friggin' wingman.
Yeah.
Well, they like to cover each other's backs, so I guess there's that.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that was fast is that they all ran from accountability. That was the only thing that was fast.
Yeah.
As quickly as they could, indeed.
Yes, yes.
I think that was a blurb in your book, Pete.
What's that?
The only thing fast in that case was how they ran from accountability. Wasn't that a blurb from your book?
It is.
Yeah. Good job, Tom.
Well, there you go. All right. What do you guys say? Let's switch it up a little bit. Mike, we said we wanted to talk about the hate crimes and the anti-Semitism on college campuses. That was something that was interesting to you. Found a report from the New York Post last November. Chilling new report reveals just how widespread anti-Semitism is at U.S. colleges, including New York City. Yeah, no kidding. Anyone who's paying attention, we know.
Well, here's the thing that I never get, and it always happens at Columbia. The campus of Columbia is on the streets of New York. It's the 26th precinct. Right? It's not an enclosed property. The college doesn't even own it. They may own the buildings, but those streets are out. And they're allowing these things to occur, and they're crimes. They are violations of civil rights. And not only is Columbia not taking action with their security personnel, they're preventing the police from doing the same. And the police department, because they have always done this and knuckled under to Columbia, dating all the way back to the peace movement in the 60s and 70s. Nobody's in charge. Nobody's putting their foot down and saying, no more, this is inhuman. When is somebody going to take charge?
That's the question for the ages, isn't it?
I suppose, yeah. But it appears that they're knuckling under. They're getting a lot of pressure, and it's the old story, attack the money, and then they start to roll over.
Yeah, but the sad part is, look where the pressure is coming from. It's coming from the White House and the Department of Education. It's not New York City policing its own. You know what I mean? It's not coming from the mayor's office. It's not coming from the district attorney's office.
No, but they're not on the right team either.
Yeah.
So it's the mayor in New York right now has enough problems on his own. I'm not going to pile on. But he's no mayor, and he was no cop.
Yeah, that's the understatement of the century, brother.
So it didn't make a pimple on a real cop's ass. But there it is. So yeah, we're not going to find relief from. And the thing is, there are still cops that want to do it, and there are bosses in the police department that want to do it, but their hands are tied.
Yeah, they want to get indicted. I wouldn't either if I were them.
Yeah. Well, I should have gotten that memo in 1992.
Yeah. Oh, but brother, I mean, look, we were cops, and look, you went through your thing, I went through a thing, DOJ. We still did our job. We still upheld our oath. We did our best. But I mean, we were blessed to be part of the golden age of policing when you think about it.
There are still guys like us out there, though.
100%.
I knew that I was being followed by the FBI, and I was still running around on the streets in Queens and in Bushwick, ripping steel off of bad guys. Because that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And there are cops out there today that are still those guys. The problem is if it goes bad, like it did for me, they're not going to have anybody protecting them. They are on their own.
I want to bring the attention to the NYPD's hate crimes dashboard. It's online, open source. They've got a word cloud for the number of incidents for bias type complaints. So if you hover over Muslim, I don't know if you can see it, the number is 5, white 2, Protestant 1, Hispanic 1, transgender 3. I believe this is as of April of this year. Asian 5, other 8, black 10, female lesbian 2, male gay 5, Buddhist 7. You ready for Jewish? 74.
Wow. And how long the time frame is this?
This is going back. It's 123 incidents, 125 arrests. I believe it's January to April of this year.
Unbelievable.
So that's what we're up.
Who hates Buddhists?
Other Buddhists.
Yeah.
They burn the naan bread. Get them.
Yeah, they're peaceful.
I don't know.
I don't know.
All right. Well, so with that, I mean, it's a travesty. Hopefully the police department gets a handle on this. Not only here, the country, the feds, they get a handle on this. This is unacceptable. It's way out of whack.
Don't tell me it's time for DA's offices to start doing their jobs again, man. Where there's no consequences, evil people will do bad things, and criminals feel empowered, man. They know they can do stuff.
That comes down to the voters, though, because who's electing these pieces of garbage?
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
You know?
But I mean, look, how do you look yourself in the mirror if you're a prosecutor and you're letting criminals run amok? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like being a
I'm going to answer that question for you. Sal Greco, Eric Dim, John McCarry, Marlon Bethel, Ron Lukash, and Rob Lukash and Ron Lacey. They all say the same thing: low information voters.
Yeah, but I mean, imagine being
over and over and over again.
Imagine going to medical school. You study to be a brain surgeon, and you never cut open the skull. These people go to law school. They want to be prosecutors, but they don't want to prosecute anybody. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and then the other culprit is the media. The media doesn't report on anything if it doesn't fit within their agenda.
I actually think they're the biggest culprit in all of this, because if they do their job, this doesn't happen. And I said this when I did my Finest Unfiltered interview with Eric and John, was like, seize the opportunity, because mainstream media is not doing their job. That gives the platform for long format interviews like this, like what they're doing, to exist, because we're calling out, and we don't get into it. We have a slightly different angle than the Finest Unfiltered team, but they get deep into the politics and the corruption of the police departments and everything that's going on, not only here, but across the country. And you know what? If the mainstream media does their job, they don't have a platform to speak.
Tommy, I'll tell you a funny story. One of my best friends, and I'm not going to name him here. I don't want to get him in trouble. He's with CNN. I have two very good friends that are reporters. One's with Fox, one's with CNN. So I was joking around with the guy from CNN, and I asked him. I said, "Yeah, because look, as you know, Tommy, I got people out of jail, 8 of them, that for murders they didn't commit. None of them are white. I blew the whistle on Fast and Furious when brown people were getting slaughtered in Mexico. My wife, as you know, is not a white female. She's Puerto Rican, 100%. So I asked him. I said, "What would happen if I shot like a Hispanic kid or black kid? Would CNN portray me as a racist?" He goes, and he brought up those things, in the past, with the people who got out of jail and Operation Fast and Furious whistleblower. He goes, yeah. He goes, even though you've done the right thing for people of color in the past, absolutely, we'd portray you as a racist.
Sells more, gets more hits, gets more likes.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. It's sad.
That's really unfortunate. All right. So, guys, what do you say? Let's pivot.
All right. That's my detective trilogy right there.
So tell us Mike, how did you start? I know we mentioned earlier that you were a creative writer in elementary school going in. You went English major in college. You start writing. You're also a poet, which that's probably I don't know any other police officer that has ever claimed to being a poet. Good for you.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Well, don't get too carried away with that, because if you read my poetry, you're going to need to have a Xanax handy. Very, very dark. The way that I actually wrote Shot to Pieces, which was my first novel, I did not want to retire. When I retired, it was not on schedule. My last knee surgery wouldn't heal. I had been a first grade detective for 5 years. I thought I had the best gig in the NYPD. I have a scope to clean out my knee, and the surgeon says I totally underestimated the amount of arthritis in that knee. We need to talk about your Article 2 pension. And I said, that's not a conversation you're allowed to be in, and your surgical notes better not reflect that. And he laughed, because he was going to write whatever it was that he found. I took it for granted that the police surgeon would be lazy and wouldn't read the notes. So when I told him I feel great, put me back to full duty, he says, are you out of your mind? You're going upstairs to file, or I'm putting you in. Wow. So it took, you don't want them putting you in, because then you're in central booking without a shield and a gun, no overtime, straight day tours, and you're just not the first grade detective you thought you were. So I went back to the squad. They kept me in the A3, despite not technically being allowed to leave the building. I caught 13 murders and solved them all in a year. So I did pretty good pension-wise. But when they told me I wasn't the police anymore, I was depressed. My life. I don't want to say it felt pointless, but I didn't feel like I had a point. And I'm bouncing around. I'm in everybody's way. I keep threatening to write a book to my wife, and she finally got tired of hearing it. And she bought me a laptop, threw it at me, and says, "Write the goddamn thing." And 2 years later, Shot to Pieces was born. And to be honest, it's still my connection to the job. In order for me to write contemporary police literature, I have to sit down with contemporary cops because everything's changed in 15 years. The way I did murder investigations is not how they do them anymore.
Yep. So with that, Shot to Pieces, let's do this.
Paddy Durr is a brilliant detective and his own worst enemy. Born in turmoil, his habit for self-destruction has him walking the razor's edge between reason and madness. When Durr catches a vicious gang murder case, it'll take everything to keep his gun out of his own mouth. The mayor and the NYPD want the case to just go away, leaving Paddy on his own. With the clock ticking, can Durr survive long enough to solve the case? Experience the must-read crime thriller Shot to Pieces by Detective Michael O'Keefe. Available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold.
Now, that's the kind of book I would read.
Yeah, me too, brother. I got to ask you something, Mike, as someone who also wrote a book. Two things I'm going to say. One is, do you find that your family members all think that you're filthy rich because you're actually a published author now? Because my family seems to think that I'm James Patterson, and they don't realize it's actually expensive to write a book, and you don't always break even or make money on them.
Which is the reason why I'm not self-publishing anymore. I actually, after Burnt to a Crisp came out, I was like, I'm not getting enough bang for my book. I don't know what I'm doing promoting these things. So I learned how to submit to agents to go traditional publishing. And I'm fortunate enough, I have an agent now, very good one. Scott Kaufman at the Don Buchwald Agency has my new book, which is a 1970s college basketball thriller, point shaving thing, where the mob wants to pressure this kid to throw the national championship. That's out right now to several imprints in Big Five Publishing. So I'm hoping by the end of the summer, I'm going to get a big fat check and not have to worry about promoting my books anymore.
Yeah. And do you find, like I found, writing a book is hard? Well, look, I'm going to be honest. My book, I had to bring in a co-author because I write like a cop, and my book read like 177,000 word police report. It's boring, so I brought in somebody that brought some life to it. But did you find like it difficult to continue to write books, especially? I mean, writing stuff that's not like I documented something I lived through. What you're documenting is it's fiction. It's interesting. I mean,
well,
challenging?
It's fiction and it isn't. Shot to Pieces. I got 3/4 done with it, but I just didn't know how I wanted to end it. It almost didn't become a series because, to be perfectly honest, Paddy Durr's brains were probably going to end up on the back wall. And then somebody convinced me, dude, this guy's a great detective. Everybody loves him except himself. Don't kill him.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So then I got 2 more novels out of it. I'm probably going to, if I publish, I have 1 more Paddy Durr novel that I'm hoping to get published through, my agent in the publishing company. But after that, I think I'm going to convert the series and have his son be the detective. And that just opens up a lot of possibilities. With respect to writing, I'm at the point now, if I don't do it, I get nervous. I get upset. I get cranky.
It's a gift. It's a gift. I'll tell you, writing
it's not a curse, Pete. It's a curse.
Well,
but there are only so many hours in the day.
Writing books is hard. Selling them is even freaking harder.
Well, that's really where you come up against it. There's like a secret sauce, and we're not in publishing. We don't know the secret sauce. You need professionals to do that for you. And to be honest, if you're gonna hire professionals, you're gonna go broke. You're gonna lose your house. You need a publishing company. But I'm at the point now. It's so therapeutic for me to write. To be honest, I've kind of pivoted away from police books. I'm writing a lot of stuff that's just different. The book I'm working on right now is a first millennial Irish historical novel called The Last High King of Ireland. And my main character is a 7-foot-tall warrior leprechaun and his banshee wife. So this is way out there, like way outside my comfort zone. And I'm writing the whole thing in a brogue, which I haven't had since I was 6 years old. But, you know, it comes back to me when I'm tired, I guess. And I'm really excited about this book. But if I can write this and actually pull it off, you know, I can write anything at that point. So it just has to be a gripping story.
So of the Paddy Durr series, which one, like, do you really feel the most connection to?
The first one, Shot to Pieces, is the most autobiographical. But all of the other books, the second book is actually a prequel. Paddy is a 17-year-old. And we find out in the book why he decides to become a cop. His mentors are detectives. But I reimagined the Pizza Connection case down in Brooklyn. And so that's, you know, these are real crimes I'm writing about. I'm just, you know, changing things to tell a better story. The third book, Burnt to a Crisp, is actually based on a arson triple homicide I caught in the 8-3. And it was a very difficult investigation. It was very complicated, very sciencey. And it was a lot of fun to write because I had to remember all of this stuff that I had to learn at the time while I was investigating it.
So let me ask you, when you were working that case, did you have to work with the arson explosion squad and with the fire marshal?
I originally reached out to Arson Explosion because the original fire marshal called it an accidental. And it wasn't. I was on my way into work that morning, and I'm looking at a distinct V pattern in the corner of the hallway, and I know enough that that's the point of ignition.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen naturally. So I actually I called Arson Explosion, but they were working on a terrorist case in Manhattan, and they put me in touch with the fire department. Has an arson squad. It's basically a special investigations unit, and the two guys were great. Tommy Kane, who I was in the police academy with before he rolled over to the FD, and Danny Caruso. Both of these guys actually retired as full chiefs in the fire department and ran the arson squad in their fire marshal's unit. These were the guys that were working on the ground with me when the case first jumped off. And they came out and they did the crime scenes for me. And they said, the guy said this was natural. I'm like, listen, he's your guy. He ain't mine. I'm the one that told him you're out of your mind. There's three people waiting to die in the burn unit. This has to get straightened out. And then from there, everything else transpired.
Hey, Mike, so let's do this. Let me do the Burnt to a Crisp trailer. Let's talk about that. And I have an arson case. I have an arson triple, and I also have an arson of an 11-year-old girl that I think there's a little bit of science that would probably be a little bit of interesting for the
Detective Paddy Durr can't catch a break. His wife is dying from 9/11 cancer. A vindictive police department psychiatrist is out to get his guns. With a corrupt mayor and first lady as her allies, even the big bosses in the NYPD can't protect him any longer. On top of that, he just caught a disturbing homicide with 3 innocent victims, no clues, and a neighborhood drug lord standing in his way. Durr is out of options and the clock is ticking. It'll take a miracle to save him now. No wonder Paddy is burnt to a crisp. Experience the gripping new crime thriller from Detective Michael O'Keefe. Available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold.
So I just want to do a shout out to Eric Dim, one of the co-hosts on Finest Unfiltered. Great guest today. Thanks for your appearance, brother. I know Eric is out and about traveling and took this time to sit and take a watch for the podcast. So thanks, Eric, for the comment and acknowledgement of Mike.
Thank you.
So arson. I'll just real quick. Fascinating case for me. A triple. It was done. It wasn't, but it was working with the fire marshals was really fun. In terms of learning as an experience, clearly a triple homicide is not fun per se, but as a detective commanding officer of the 7-night squad, triple homicide, arson, lot to learn scientifically. But what happened in 27 Brevoort Place in August of 2001, we had a arson for profit a brownstone, wanted to evict all the Section 8 people and then turn it into an apartment complex. And what we learned that the likelihood of the arsonist of being injured was very high because the fire marshals were able to tell that he used gasoline only, and then the fumes ignited and probably injured this person, completely shared by reading the fire patterns on the staircase and in the foyer into the house. When we eventually tracked down Antonio Casanova, he did have burns on him. It's a long story, maybe for another episode. But what he said was really smart, capable arsonists will dilute gasoline and kerosene because they get the ignition from the gasoline and then the heavy, hot burn from the kerosene. So again, as an investigator, detective, fascinating work. So with that, I just want to share that. I have some arson cases myself, but go ahead, tell the story and how you finish up on how you got to burn to a crisp.
Well, once I got, it was actually funny because I took off the day before. And on my way into work, I'm in traffic on Wilson Avenue, and I see this crime scene, and it's not really a crime scene. They're just keeping people out because the building's burnt. And I stop quick, and I go and I talk to the cops watching it, and they're like, "No, the fire marshals called it an accidental. They think it was electric." And I'm looking in the hallway. There's no electric on the first floor. There was no electrical ignition. I saw the very pronounced burn pattern in the corner where the garbage would have been. The garbage is actually melted into the floor. I was like, do not go in there. Do not let anybody else go in there. This is a crime scene. I'll be back. So I go into the squad, and the night before we had 2 homicides. One was it was a bias crime, a hate crime. Polish laborer got his head caved in by a neighborhood drug dealer because he got drunk sitting on the stoop on Star Street, and he wouldn't leave, and they wanted to sell drugs, so they bashed his brains in with a baseball bat. And there was a gang shooting right on the border of the 8-1 that we were going to solve it. It was just going to take like a year for somebody to flip. But the 8-3 squad is full of people. And the lieutenant says, listen, we got Joyce's bias crime. You can jump on that. You can work with Riz on his gang shooting. I says, I'm going to take the arson over on Wilson. He goes, no, the fire marshal said that was natural. I'm like, no, you got a triple homicide coming. I said, and I'm going to start working it now because I'm up and I'm going to work on that. He's like, you're killing me. Billy McSorley was the CO at the time. So
good friend.
Yeah. So we end up I get a good baseline of investigation going. The first thing I do is I get the fire marshals to change their finding that it is in fact arson. And the problem is the 3 victims, and one was there was an 85-year-old man with dementia, his wife who was 83, and also she was bedridden, and their 30-year-old son with Down syndrome were the 3 victims. Couldn't be more innocent. Unbeknownst to me, the son of that family was one of the biggest drug dealers in Bushwick. And he kept telling everybody, don't talk to the police. I'm going to take care of this myself. And that infuriated me as a detective whenever I encountered that, because nobody takes care of shit. That's my job. I'll take care of it because you're not going to do anything. And sure enough, he was getting in the way. I had to leverage him. I had to make his life miserable just to get him to get out of my way to allow people to talk to me. And once the other problem was every witness that I came up with was somehow compromised. They had one kid who was, they call it neurodivergent now. He was definitely on the spectrum, but he knew what he knew. And he was right on point on who it was. My other eyeball, who was not neurodivergent, was in fact the biggest drug dealer from Bushwick. And I had to flip him. I had to convince him. And then the other problem we had is because he was such a nasty individual, I had to prove that he was where he was when he saw what it was. And it was one of the first cases where we were actually pinpointing someone on where his cell phone was hitting the towers. So I was able to prove his movements, that he was right on the corner to see what he said he was seeing. So I had to get over all of that. And then the other problem was the guy was such a sociopath. I spent 19 hours interrogating him. And the closest I got is he gave me a hypothetical. The nice thing about it is some of the things in the hypothetical only the killer could have known. So that worked as a confession. And then the horrible nature of the crime. And the other thing is the person who was the intended target was a 17-year-old girl who had just aborted the killer's baby. And he lost his mom, and he threatened that he was going to burn the house down. And the next day he did. So, but it was pretty cool. And I got to learn a lot about the science. For instance, my guy used only kerosene. Kerosene is alcohol based. It does not leave the evidence that gasoline does. The nice thing about gasoline is there's so many impurities and additives in gasoline. The fire marshals can actually tell you from the testing what brand of gas it was and where it was likely bought, what batch it came from. You don't get that with alcohol-based accelerant.
Right. Very cool. Very interesting.
It is.
Pete, you ever work an arson case?
Oh, yeah. When I got hired by ATF, I spent my first 3 years in an arson group, although I spent most of it doing home invasion cases. But I actually worked on a case that happened on Father's Day in Queens where 5 firefighters were killed. And it was weird. Look, Mike brought up a lot of science. I didn't know shit about any of this stuff. So we brought in the fire marshals were working with us. Constantly 5 New York City firemen killed. That's their baby. We were there to assist. And then we brought in an engineer. ATF has a national response team. They have arson experts. They have engineers, structural engineers. And what happened was they determined that some asshole lit some garbage on fire by an exterior stairwell. The heat caused some of the fire to go under a door. And then it was a hardware store, a paint and hardware store. What happened was some of the boxes inside began to smolder. It started to expand. Smoke is unburned fuel. So what happened was as the firemen breached the door to extinguish the fire, they caused an explosion because this now unburned fuel had just enough oxygen to mix with it to cause this explosion. It literally lifted this gigantic building and shifted it on its foundation by about 4 inches. So, that was like my first exposure to working an arson case. I was assisting, worked on a couple others. And look, the reality is I'm far from an expert. But as Mike pointed out, there's a lot of science to it that's really, really interesting. So folks that want to focus on that, it's great. And the other thing is if you learn that really well and then you retire, you can do pretty good in the insurance industry as a retirement gig. But I mean, the stuff Mike talked about kind of made me, brought back some memories about the burn pattern, the V pattern and whatnot. That's all stuff I learned working with those guys.
Well, the other thing that happened with this is this particular building was a 4-story walk-up, and they had just installed a new steel staircase going up to the roof, and they never covered. People would go up on the roof to hang out, and they'd never put the cover back on. So consequently, when the fire started to burn down in the hallway, the oxygen sucked it straight up the stairwell. So the whole building went up in minutes and it completely engulfed it. And one of the best witnesses on the trial was actually the lieutenant on the engine company, the engine truck. He testified that brand new steel staircase was bending under their weight, was melting and bending under their weight. It was so hot. They had to jump off the stairs and get water on it before they could get back on it. Wow. That's how hot it was.
Fire's no joke.
And they didn't go in until everybody was like, they didn't rush in while the building was burning. They verified everybody had gotten out, and that included the 3 victims. But by then the smoke inhalation. Yeah. And they didn't die right away. It took a couple of days, like one after another. I would get the notification from the burn unit at Cornell and have to go there and add to it. It was homicide. I want to say 10, 11, and 12.
I can't think of a worse way to die, brother. But I mean, I also imagine for you, that must have been incredibly satisfying to solve that case and to bring justice.
It was satisfying to solve it, but it broke my heart because when you catch a homicide, you have to get to know your victims.
Yeah.
And I had, when you're a Brooklyn homicide and shooting detective, it's very seldom you're ever dealing with anyone who's 100% innocent. These people were 100% innocent. And talking to the neighbors, particularly about the son, Miguel, the kid was a sweetheart. He'd be out front of the house dancing all the time. He was a great big kid. He used to love to pick people up and hug them and spin them around. He had kisses for everybody. A cop car or a fire truck couldn't go by that he wasn't waving at them. He was just a guy that everybody loved. There was no point in him dying.
Yeah,
and it kind of broke my heart.
It breaks my heart hearing the story, man. Two elderly people and somebody who's mentally,
Yeah.
Like, what was the address on this? What was it, cross streets? You remember?
I want to say Wilson and Hancock.
Okay, I know. Yeah, I know it well. So, okay. Any
It
final
might have
thoughts?
been
All right.
404 Wilson, I think was the address.
Okay. We are at 15,833 viewers right now. So thank you for everyone for tuning in. We're going to go around the room and do some final thoughts. Check out michaelokeefeauthor.com for his books. Pick up his books. You can also pick them up on Amazon. I believe there's books on tape as well, right, Mike?
Yeah, I have an Audible for I think 3 books. I haven't done Burn to a Crisp yet. I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to be directed by my publisher when I get them. But the easiest way to get the books, though, is if you go on my website. If you scroll down on the website, there's an action button to Amazon, and that'll bring you right to my author page. And all 5 of my books are there. I have this trilogy. I have a short story book, 13 prize-winning short stories. It's called 13 Stories, Fractured, Twisted, and Put Away Wet. So you can guess what they're about. And I have a short novella that I like to refer to as my origin story. It's Paddy Durr is Michael O'Keefe is Irish Mickey from Brooklyn. So
sure.
They're all interesting reads.
Yeah. Well, I think, Pete, if you have any other final thoughts, but if there's anything related to what we talked about today that we didn't get to, but we're always going to end with officer wellness and all of our people, whether you're a civilian or you're on the job, whether it's this job or any other first responder, military, or anything. I think officer wellness is starting to get some momentum for the Ten-Four Tavern from the last show last week and all through this week, and a lot of outreach from a lot of officer wellness programs, and certainly it's very near and dear to our hearts. Pete especially is involved in a lot of work and a lot of talking. Carlos last week, our guest, broke down and made a lot of confessions that showed his vulnerability. Actually, it's a bravery thing. So there's that. So Mike, I think with your books and what you've talked about and all the stuff you went through, I think you can understand what we go through as a
police suicide and self-harm and the depression that comes from that kind of work. I deal with extensively. I deal extensively with post-traumatic stress. To this day, people still don't understand. The general public doesn't understand what we go through. If you do this for long enough and you really get involved, and the 3 of us, we got involved.
Yep.
People touch you.
Yep.
And their loss means something. It's a piece of you that's getting taken away. And you're still responsible for making sense of that death, for finding closure for that family. But it takes a toll.
Yes,
it takes a toll. And the fact that these days in police work, you don't have a lot of people who have your back. The people you work for, the people in charge of you, are more often than not trying to take a piece out of your ass rather than protect you. I shudder to think the stress that these kids are under now.
Yep. All right, Pete, I'm going to bounce it to you. Any final thoughts? Wrap up anything we didn't get to? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, a couple things. Mike, first, thanks for being honest, man. And look, I get it. What we did leave scars. And I always say it's okay to not be okay. It's not okay to not do something about it. So look, it takes balls to ask for help. It doesn't take balls to sit there in silence, dwelling in your own head. So yeah, man, if someone's listening and look, buy into the nonsense about your career ending. You don't have to go to the job. You can if your job's good. If not, go to clergy, go to whoever, go to a peer or something. Just don't just.
I went outside the department when I was having problems.
Yeah, I went to a guy who teaches meditation, who had a medical background. But I mean,
back in 1992.
That makes three, buddy.
Yeah. Back in 1992, if I had gone to the job and told them, I don't feel right, their answer would have been to take my guns, and I never would have saw the street again.
Right. But look, the reality is, for a lot of departments, look, some are still stuck in the past.
Yeah.
A lot of them have come a long way. And look,
NYPD is much better at it than it used to be.
The military were the ones who really started to push this, and then law enforcement followed suit. We got a long way to go. Yeah. But, in closing, man, you and I know we met once at a New York Shields function back in the early 1990s, which is a lifetime ago. And I was excited to have you on as a guest. But seeing what you did with your career after that and recovering from what you went through, because a lot of people wouldn't have. Man, I really enjoyed having you here. I love you, brother. I hope we can stay in touch. You're a hero. You're a hero of mine, at least. So it was really interesting and fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed tonight's conversation, and I hope we can continue to talk in the future, brother.
I appreciate the kind words, Pete, but because I know so do you, Tommy. I'm not comfortable hearing that I'm a hero. In my opinion, the three of us and the other guys who we commonly want to refer to as heroes, maybe we are. Maybe there's something heroic because we kept showing up when it was easier just not to show up anymore.
You showed up and then you hit it out of the park.
Part of it was Irish spite. I mean, one of the reasons why I got very healthy after I retired. I eat right. I get 8 hours of sleep. I'm in the gym every day. And the reason is, after what the job and the federal government did to me after 1992, I'm going to live to be 170. I am going to get so old they have to send 2 detectives from the pension section out every month to verify I'm still alive.
I love it, brother.
And that's just spite.
I appreciate you, man.
My final comment is one more question lobbed over to Mike, or one more request. Talk about your football coaching, because I know it's near and dear to your heart.
All right. Yeah, the varsity is already up and running. We got together with 4 other schools in Nassau County. They just this past week, we were running 7-on-7s, the quarterback drills with the defensive backs. Next week, I think we're handing out the equipment, and I'm going to go down for when the linemen show up.
So everybody follow Farmingdale High School football.
This is our year, by the way.
Nice. All right.
It'll take an act of God to beat us, but yeah, it's the Dale this year.
Yep. Well, with that, guys, Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate it. You went through something that a lot of us didn't go through. Thank God you came up looking good, on the right side of the grass, out of your own words, and that they didn't hurt you like they should not have. You did the job that we all know we might have to do one day, and thank God you're here, and thank God for all the contributions you've made since then. So with that, thank you. Since we're in the tavern, it's time for me to hit the head, guys.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed the night.
Take care, Mike. God bless. Tommy, it's always a pleasure.
Okay, take care, everybody.